Welcome. Today we're going to spend a few minutes talking about various views of the sacred as well as modes of interpretation. What I'd like you to think of as we approach this subject is nuance. Think of these terms as nuanced or perhaps as on a continuum as opposed to um, either this or that. Um, Let me give you an illustration as we look at specific terminology. So, monotheism, the worship of one God; polytheism, the worship of many gods. It seems to be very clear, right? You either worship one God or you worship many. However, there is some nuance that goes along with those terms. Monotheism is the worship of one God, and we might think of monotheistic traditions as, say, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. However, in Christianity, God is understood as Trinity, one divine being with three manifestations. So, is that strictly monotheism, or does that bleed a little bit into polytheism? We'll see this even more when we look at a religion like Hinduism, in which there is one divine essence, and that divine essence is called Brahman. And yet, that one divine essence is said to have 330 million manifestations. And of course, we're going to learn them all in this class in alphabetical order. Just kidding. So, one divine essence, 330 million manifestations. Is that monotheism or is that polytheism? Most Hindus would describe themselves as monotheistic, and yet those who are on the outside tend to look at Hinduism as a polytheistic tradition, or even more perhaps accurately as pantheistic. That is, everything is sacred. God is everything and everything is God, which in effect is what saying 330 million really means, right? Nobody sat down probably and counted to 330 million and said, oh, that's it. There's not one more, one over, one less. It's exactly 330 million. Rather, that number is given as a way of saying infinite, as many manifestations as you can possibly think of. Monotheism, the worship of one God; polytheism, the worship of many gods. And there are those nuanced areas in between, like with Christianity and the Trinity, with Hinduism and its many manifestations, with Yoruba tradition, Orisha worship. Another example, one divine being, 440 manifestations. Another place where we see continuum is in the idea of transcendence and immanence. So, transcendence is the divine separate from the created world or distinct from the created world. In other words, is the creator of the physical world. Eminence is more divine presence within the created world. That is, the divine manifest in one another or in physical reality. So, transcendence and eminence are also somewhat on a continuum in that most religious traditions have some aspects of eminence and some aspects of transcendence. If we use another example that you might be familiar with, let's say the Christian Trinity. The transcendent aspects of the Trinity are the idea of God as creator or father, that aspect of divinity that creates a sense of awe and wonder. whereas eminence is the divine present more in the world in which we live. So we could say that Jesus perhaps is an example of eminence. The divine becomes human, manifest in the physical world. Or we might even look at eminence as the Holy Spirit, present with us always. So the idea of eminence is present, but so is the idea of transcendence. Most religious traditions have some combination of transcendence and immanence. Eminence, the divine present in the created world, can refer to people. It can refer to natural formations. So, for instance, in many indigenous religious traditions, rocks are sacred, mountains, bodies of water. The idea that and that is eminence. But eminence can also be standing on the top of a mountain and seeing in that breathtaking view evidence of some sacred presence at work. Most religious traditions, as we'll see throughout the course, emphasize some aspects of transcendence, some aspects of eminence. Those traditions that are monotheistic tend to emphasize transcendence a little bit more, whereas those traditions that are polytheistic tend to emphasize eminence a little bit more. But both are generally present. Animism is the idea that all living things have spirit and are spiritually interconnected. You see this especially in indigenous religions, and it might bring to mind perhaps the movie The Lion King, the circle of life, the idea that all of us, human beings, created world, are connected in one way or another. Another aspect in terms of the sacred that we're going to discuss is the idea of hierophany. That is a physical manifestation or a visible manifestation of the sacred. That can be, again, a person such as a prophet, or it could be a natural formation, or it could be a symbol, it could be a sacred object. The whole idea of hierophany is that there is a divine pointer to some physical manifestation. Finally, I'd like to talk about the terms theistic and non-theistic. One of the things that we talked about with the definitions of religion in our last little mini lecture is that sometimes religion is defined as the worship of a god or gods. However, not all religious traditions focus on a worship of a deity. Theistic religions definitely focus on a relationship with a god or gods. And Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all can be aspects of theistic religions, religious traditions. Non-theistic traditions are those spiritual or faith traditions that center on an ethical system or a philosophical worldview rather than on the worship of a deity. And examples of this would be Buddhism, which focuses on the teachings of the Buddha, or Taoism, which looks at there being a sacred underlying force, but it's our job to align ourselves with that sacred underlying energy. So one of the points of confusion that often comes up is what's the difference between atheism and non-theism? Atheism is a denial of the existence of divine beings, a denial of the existence of anything outside of the physical world, the measurable world. Non-theistic religions do not necessarily deny the existence of divine beings. In fact, in some forms of Buddhism, you will hear talk of bodhisattvas or spirits, ghosts, whereas um, however, there isn't in non theistic religious traditions an emphasis on building a relationship with those divine beings. Um, in this case, the way that one achieves liberation, nirvana, enlightenment is through one's own efforts rather than it being bestowed on you by a deity. So, for instance, in Christianity, one is understood to be saved by God through Jesus Christ. In Buddhism, one is not enlightened through Buddha. Rather, one reaches enlightenment by practicing the teachings of the Buddha. So it is you yourself that achieves enlightenment rather than the Buddha conferring enlightenment upon you. The last thing I want to talk about today is modes of interpretation. I like to say that this is at the same time the most important slide and the most useless slide that we will have over the course of the semester. Modes of interpretation refers to the lenses through which we look at a faith tradition. And you will see all kinds of labels: liberal, conservative, orthodox, heretic, fundamentalist. And as with any other label, these don't really tell us much of anything because one can be liberal about one thing and perhaps conservative about something else. One can be a heretic when it comes to one particular view, but fundamentalist when it comes to another. And so the way that each of us approaches any faith tradition is through our own lenses. That means there is an infinite variety in the way that religions are interpreted. So one can never say that all Christians think this, or all Muslims wear this, or all Buddhists practice that. There is variety, and we recognize that in terms of different denominational or sectarian understandings, like a Zen Buddhist as opposed to a Tibetan Buddhist. Or a Baptist as opposed to an Episcopalian. But even within those sectarian differences, there is still nuance and interpretation so that you would not have all Baptists believing or doing the same thing, in the same way that you would not have all Sunni Muslims practicing in exactly the same way. So I hope that some of this has cleared up some of the confusion, and it probably has also added to the confusion a little bit when we look at terminology to explore religious traditions. These are terms that we will come back to over and over again throughout the semester. So if you have any questions, I hope that you will be quick to let me know. Thanks for joining me today.